Deafrowe with Deafrowe TV, and I'm back again with another review. But before I get started on this review, please remember to like, subscribe, and share. Hit that notification bell so you can see what other stuff that I post, but also go back and see the other movies that I have posted before, especially since this is Knightriders from 1981, written and directed by George A. Romero. Please go back and look at the other George A. Romero movies that I have also reviewed. I've reviewed some pretty obscure George A. Romero movies and also some of his more popular stuff like Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, and all those type things. And also be on the lookout for After the Weekend coming up soon because I will be on their channel again, and I will leave a link in the description below to their YouTube channel so you can watch what we are reviewing next coming up pretty soon. So let's get started on Knightriders 1981, written and directed by George A. Romero, starring Ed Harris as Billy, which is the one with the helmet on in this picture. We got Amy Ingersoll as Lynette, which is the one riding on the motorcycle in this picture as well. We have Gary uh, I don't know how to say his last name, but I will try. Lati or Lati, if I messed it up, I'm sorry. Playing Alan. You got the legendary Tom Savini playing Morgan or Morgan Le Fay. Like I said, this is like a medieval times reenactment troupe. Only they don't reenact with like horses and that kind of thing. They do all the jousting and everything, but they do it on like motorcycles. It's like almost like you took medieval times and mixed it with Mad Max. It's kind of a cool concept actually. Be kind of cool to see it today. I would watch it. And you got another Patricia Tallman playing Julie, which ends up being the Alan's love interest in the beginning of this movie. And of course, plethora of the other characters throughout this movie that also appeared in other George A. Romero movies, both in the past and in the future from the time point of this movie from 1981. So it's pretty cool that you see some of these characters or these actors in something else other than the main thing that they're known for. Uh, and I will try to point them out as I go along here in this review. But essentially, Ed Harris's character Billy, to set him up, he is all about the lifestyle of living like a knight or living like a king that has all these people around him that follow him, almost like a cultish like figure, but not really, because he really cares about his the people that are following him. And so, and then we have Alan here, and he's reviewing this this mallet almost that Morgan is wanting to use on him. And here's Morgan, played by Tom Savini. In this movie, he has a lot of acting in this movie, so you get to see him quite a lot in this movie. Actually, I wish the same thing wouldn't do that. DVD. Here we go. All right, so if you look to the left here, the guy in the brown and yellow, that is Ken Foree from the 1978 movie Dawn of the Dead, and right next to him is Scott Reiniger, who plays Marhalt in this movie. He played Roger in the 1978 Dawn of the Dead. So kind of cool. And Ken Foree's character in this movie is Little John. So so already you got two guys, well three actually, because Tom Savini was in Dawn of the Dead as well. He was towards the end as one of the motorcycle gang that comes in and trashes up the mall. So yeah, essentially you got three characters right or three actors on the left here. We're in the 1978 Dawn of the Dead, which is pretty cool. So and of course, Savini being the makeup effects guy for that movie as well. And then you got the mechanic lady here called her name is Angie, and she is basically in a relationship with Morgan, and it's kind of like almost a psychologically abusive relationship because Morgan likes to sleep around a lot, even though that is his main squeeze. And yeah, you can tell here she's not too happy about him. Anyway, yeah, at this point, the deputy sheriff shows up and is trying to extort them for money for being there. Even though they already have a permit from the sheriff, for some reason the deputy sheriff thinks he can come in and just, you know, basically bully him around and get some money out of him. And then you meet Merlin here, which deputy kind of messes with him a little. Are you really a doctor? He says, yes, I am. I am board certified and good standing, and everything else. Is like, I have all my tools here in this van. You know, basically telling him is like he could do anything and everything. So anyway, they're trying to extort money, and then Ed Harris, basically her Billy, he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. That's against, it's kind of is against my code, against my honor. I'm not going to do that. And Morgan's trying to convince him to pay up so they don't mess with us later, because they're going to come back. That's going to come back and haunt you, pretty much, is what Morgan's trying to say. And it kind of does, actually. But Billy doesn't care and carries on anyway. And yeah, as you can see here, a little background on this. If you look, this is actually Stephen King and his wife in this movie. Just a small little cameo. No, rather, this is Stephen King and his wife Tabitha King playing a spectator. And essentially, what it was, King was on the set because he was working with George A. Romero on the script of Creepshow that was going to come out in 1982. So King just decided, Romero just decided, hey, just sit over here and be a small little cameo spot in this movie. So that's kind of what they did. And so there you go. You got a Stephen King cameo out of this movie as well. Not that you wanted or needed one, but there you go. Yeah, we have to go further on. Keep going here. And what happens in this first little medieval tournament is Morgan is the most skilled one, and he's on the bad guy's side. They all wear the black armor. All the good guys wear like the brownish armor. And if you can look, if you see here, right here to the left of the guy with the mustache, that is Harold Wayne Jones playing the character of Boar. And if you've seen him before, it's from the 1973 movie The Crazies, also done by George A. Romero. So, pretty cool that he's in this movie as well. So, we already got so many different characters from other Romero movies before this one. But we'll see some characters, or we'll see some actors from future movies as well in this Romero movie that will be in future Romero movies from this movie. I mean, future moving forward from this movie, let's put it that way. Anyway, what ends up happening is the king, Billy himself, gets out there and messes with Morgan a little bit. And the king was already injured, already had a messed up shoulder, and Morgan was using that club that you saw, that we saw Alan having in his hands early on. And what Morgan ends up doing, he ends up messing the collar up on the armor that Billy was wearing, ends up putting a gash in his shoulder, which Merlin has to stitch up. So yeah, as you can see here, the stitches to the right there, Merlin's having to put into his shoulder. He's like, but you gotta. He's telling him, he's like, you can't open it back up. You're just gonna bleed out every time you do it. You gotta heal up. But Billy, being Billy, he doesn't want to take any of that advice. And then we get to Patricia Tallman, as you can see here, as Julie. And she looks familiar. It's because she is familiar. If you ever seen the 1990 remake of Night of the Living Dead, Patricia Tallman goes on to play Barbara in that remake, which was directed by Tom Savini, and was the only remake that had George A. Romero's blessing because he wanted Savini to direct it and do everything in it. And of course, Patricia Tallman being Barbara in that movie as well. So pretty cool. But she's basically like going along with Alan here, pretty much chasing him. Uh, becomes his girlfriend of sorts. And we get to this section of the medieval times play here, and they decide to let people from the outside play around with their tools and stuff. And they have to sign a waiver, like you would anything else. Put a helmet on and go out there and try to, put the staff through the ring and all that kind of stuff. Maybe hit a watermelon with an axe while it's hanging from the thing. Trying to show them what they do is not easy to do. But these motorcyclists, end up tearing stuff up and messing things up and just messing up equipment, running off with equipment and all kinds of things. And then, of course, one of the women in the troop ends up going after a couple of them and making them pay. Like this guy, he sends them off into a. He ends up hitting a bunch of signs and then going to pay, and then running off into a farmer's market. That's kind of funny. Anyway, then it's that night, and this town is a little town of Bakersville, and of course that deputy sheriff is not going to stay away because he didn't get paid off like he wanted to. He's gonna be the jackass that he is, and so that's essentially what happens. Is the sheriff shows up that night and just picks a random truck to go through, the old camper truck, and decides to take a look. And of course, he takes a look and finds the magic weed that just appeared out of nowhere. And takes him and puts him in custody. And of course, Billy's stepping up. It's like, if you're taking him, you're taking me. And so he ends up doing that. And Morgan's like, I don't know what you're doing. Anyway, so the deputy sheriff, being the corrupt asshole person that he is, beating the shit out of the guy that they found the drugs on. And Billy's like, I don't know what the hell you're doing or why you're doing this, all because of your ego. And so Billy's like, quit hitting him. As you can see here, Alan and the rest of them come to get Billy and the other guy out. And of course, that being one of the guys that's with them, that he knows the laws and stuff, and he knows he can't be doing what he's doing. He's cussing them out and anything like that. And of course, Billy is pissed off, and Billy wants a piece of him about this time. And then they're kind of having to hold Billy back as they're leaving the sheriff's office. But that won't be the last time that Billy sees him, that's for sure. Billy's going to come back around to that. And we're moving on to another town here where they're going to do uh, another round of their show. And they're coming to this little town. I think this town is called Lawrence, if I'm not mistaken. And they're bombarded by this group of these two or three people here that is with it's like a talent agent. And the talent agent guy is played by Martin Ferrero Bontempi. He's the one with the white coat over here. And basically, he's they want to talk to Billy, but Morgan tells them the truth because earlier, and I didn't show this, but a kid had come up with a magazine to Billy and tried to get him to sign it. And Billy's like, I don't do that kind of thing, kid. I'm not into that because he like is strictly like, hey, we're going to be medieval and that's it. This is my lifestyle, whatever. And Morgan's like, man, what gives? Just sign it for the kid. And like, I just can't do it. And so the kid, Billy gives the magazine back to the kid, kind of disappointing the kid. But Morgan picks it up. It's like, look, I'll sign it for you, kid. I don't mind. And essentially, what it is, he didn't like that somebody was taking pictures of what they were doing on these motorcycles and stuff. He's like, it's not about the motorcycles. It's about what we're doing. It's the medieval spirit and trying to, you know, not just entertain, but give people an escape. Kind of like the reason we do this because we escaped our own mundane lives and we're able to go do something we wanted to do, not what we were told to do. Which is why he doesn't want anybody, a talent agent or anything, telling him what he needs to be doing to make money, more money, and all this other stuff. which is kind of what his lawyer tries to tell him. Is like you could be making a load more money if you just did things a certain way instead of trying to live this life, basically. Instead of live this life, treat it like a business. And Billy doesn't want to do that. Billy wants to be, this is my life and this is what I want to do. But this talent agent, he's like, I need to talk to Billy or whatever. And Billy is like, he tells the talent agent guys, like, Billy's not going to talk to you. I mean, Morgan's not being mean by any stretch of the imagination. Morgan's just being truthful. Billy's not going to talk to you. Billy's not going to do this whole thing and set up this whole thing like a circus and let cameras in and all this other thing. It's a live show and live show only, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, Morgan's not lying to him, per se. He's telling him the truth. You see Ken Forey as Little John here again. So as you can see here, they're doing like a little parade through town to drum up business, for the show that they're going to give. I mean, it's kind of like a Ren Fair, I guess you could say, but it's like a medieval times meets Ren Fair meets Mad Max, because they don't have horses, like medieval times would, but they do jousting and the sword play and all this other stuff like you would see in medieval times. But then it's like a Ren Fair in the way that they sell food, they sell crafts, and they sell, they have like a blacksmith on board there that's, doing like little swords and stuff like that. So it's kind of a mix of all three things. And the motorcycles are the whole Mad Max part of it. They got these rigged up motorcycles with the shield where they can put the jousting sticks on. So kind of a cool idea. And this guy, his character comes into play pretty soon. That is Indian. That's the character's name, Indian. I didn't make that up. But you see him later on for a reason. Anyway, like I said, Billy had to be let out of jail, so they're behind everybody. Everybody's already there doing the parade and everything for the next show to be put on. And Billy's trying to catch up with them pretty much with Merlin driving here. But they decide to pull over that night and just kind of discuss with Billy, like, maybe Billy, you're taking this way too serious and you're going to end up getting yourself killed because you won't let yourself heal. You keep bleeding every time you go out there because you don't let your injuries heal. And it's like, you don't need to be in every single show. You could just kind of ride it out for a couple shows and then let yourself heal and then get back out there. But Billy is so adamant about the lifestyle that he does not want to hear any of that. And that's the lawyer guy that's trying to convince him, like, you could be making so much more money if you just do things a certain way rather than try to live this lifestyle. And Billy's like, yeah, I just can't do it. He just believes so much in it that he doesn't want to do it. And it kind of comes out towards the end here is when Billy leaves them at the camp and shows up at Lawrence and he hears them complaining about Billy pretty much and what they're doing there. And the one guy complaining, which is the guy that makes the jewelry and the leather stuff, is he's kind of pissed off. His main complaint was letting the outsiders come in and play with their stuff because it ends up being it's a high risk thing that Billy allows to happen. Because if one of those guys come in, even though they signed a waiver and everything, if something happens to them, they can still sue or whatever, or the damage they do to their equipment and everything else ends up costing money. Just, you know, things of that nature in general. Let's see if I can catch this. So yeah, and he catches them complaining when he comes, and like, of course, she's like, "Oh no, this guy right here. This guy's the jewelry maker guy, whatever." Anyway, if he looks familiar, that's because he is familiar. He goes on later to be in a 1985 George A. Romero movie called Day of the Dead. That is Joseph Pilato. and he played Captain Henry Rhodes in Day of the Dead, one of the most iconic characters from that movie. Period. Just find it hilarious that he's in this movie, but here he is. But he ends up being the one complaining, and that's when Billy gets kind of pissed off and starts yelling at him for all this kind of stuff. So yeah, he is adamant, like I said, and it's wearing out. It's wearing out the rest of the crew because it's not only him that has to take on all the punishment. Because every time he does this to himself, it worries everybody, especially that he won't let his injuries heal. But also because the stuff that he lets kind of happen that ends up costing money, and you can't keep something going. And Morgan's basically like, look, calm down, dude. You're taking this way too seriously. You're not the only one that's putting himself at risk here. But like I said, he's not gonna listen either way. So at this new show in Lawrence, you have a bunch of these guys show up in their own armor and stuff like that, and they decide to start causing a ruckus nearby. And there's an old dude from Dawn of the Dead right here. You can tell who he is right here. Pretty good. He played the character Roger in Dawn of the Dead. Oh, this is a long movie, 2.5 hours, so I'm gonna have to skip through quite a bit here because it's going to take a while. Anyway, what ends up happening after this show in Lawrence is Morgan goes one way with the talent agent guy, deciding, hey, I can make a career out of doing this. I need to go with this guy. And so Morgan takes off in one direction, and then what happens in this whole tournament here is again Billy decides to get out there and fight again. He ends up fighting Alan, which he doesn't. Alan's not wanting to fight him because he's injured and doesn't want to go through all that again. But he makes Alan make a choice, and then Alan ends up submitting, say, "Hey, okay, you won, whatever." And then because Billy had been having these dreams of this raven or whatever, he thinks he has to fight the guy with the raven on his armor. And the guy with the raven on his armor ends up being Indian, which is the one we saw in the this yeah as you can see he's got the so Billy thinks he has to fight this guy for some reason, whatever. So that's what he ends up doing. He does get Indian to submit, but because he's doing all this fighting with his arm that's been shredded up, he's bleeding all over. And of course, Billy, that you see here, he's got the blood soaking down that left arm that's holding the sword, and he basically puts it down on Indian, so he's basically making him submit. And as soon as he submits, he just like falls over. And Indian is kind of like perplexed by the whole thing. He doesn't really understand what's going on, but he's enamored by him at the same time. And like from then on, Indian just follows him around everywhere. I mean, even when he's in the tent trying to heal up, Indian's there. And yeah, Merlin's trying to tell him like, look, man, you opened this thing up like twice now since I've stitched you up. You need to quit doing this. And at this point, Alan and Boar decide to leave. And Boar is played by Harold Wayne Jones, which played a character from the movie The Crazies in 1973, another George A. Romero movie. Let's see if I can get a shot of him real quick. see. There he is. Yeah, there you go. That's Harold Wayne Jones. He was in the 1973 movie as Crank, I think, called the movie called The Crazies. That another movie that George A. Romero had done. So it's probably kind of cool to see him like in the 1981 movie Knightriders. So anyway, then we cut over to Morgan in the direction they went. They went with a talent agent guy, and he's playing around at a pool at one of the girls' houses. And the talent agent guy is basically trying to get rid of Tuck, but he wants to get rid of Tuck, but keep Morgan. And of course, they're doing this photo shoot and everything, and the photo shoot's kind of ridiculous. See if I can get back to it. Yeah, you can see here. Yeah, that's kind of ridiculous. Oh, it's so weird. And it just says Knight Rider. It's just crazy. It's kind of funny at the same time. And then at this point, Billy, they're still in Lawrence. They're still at the location there, and Billy decides, hey, we're going to hunker down here for a while. He says, because I think all the guys they will come back eventually. So he thinks that Alan and Morgan and the rest of the guys they'll eventually come back. And while Alan's out and about, with the friends that they're, chilling out with to take a break from Billy, he realizes, he needs to take Julie back to her house. The whole reason she left her house and everything is because her father was abusing her mom, and she didn't want to stick around and deal with it. Well, Alan decides, like, look, you got to go back home. This ain't right for me to be just dragging you around. You need to finish what you started. Stand up to your father. Do what you got to do. It's like, but I'm not the answer to your problems. Is basically what he tells her. Uh, and so he ends up taking her back because he realizes like she's not really in love with him. She's just in love with the idea of him and running away. Because all she wants to, she right about this moment, she's like, "Hey, when are we gonna go party?" And all this other stuff. So basically, she's trying to run even further away from the situation at home instead of dealing with it. So Alan decides to make the mature decision and take her back home, and then head back to the medieval troop. Anyway, like she's devastated by the whole thing. Of course, she's very young. She doesn't know what's going on. She's like, "Oh shit, my father just turned on the light." Anyway, so then about this time, that's when Alan finds out where Morgan's at, and Morgan is having second thoughts about his whole, doing this event thing with this, this talent agent because he's realizing the whole thing is very shallow and he doesn't really like it as much as he liked being with Billy and the rest of the guys. So he's sitting outside the hotel room just kind of contemplating after the guys inside are just, you know, they got so much pent up energy and stuff because they're not out and about with the rest of the guys that they just tore up the hotel room. And so Morgan's just sitting outside, like, what the hell am I supposed to do now? I burnt one bridge, and I'm not sure if I want to be on this other bridge, basically. And that's when Alan shows up and gives him an idea. Hey, basically, he's like, we got to go back. So they decide to go back, and they do this whole thing where they're in this new armor and everything. It looks like something out of a space. You know, it's some weird thing. and like he gives his girlfriend a little hello and stuff, and he's like he realizes for the first time Morgan realizes what he could be losing if he leaves all these people behind, including the woman that he loves, which is also the mechanic. Because this whole time he's kind of been a big womanizer. He's just been kind of sleeping around with whoever he wants to, including the woman that was in the pool with him. And he comes back realizing the mistakes that he made, and he's wanting to make it up to everybody. And basically, him and Alan's idea is this: that whoever wins between the bad guy and the good guy, if Alan wins, then Billy remains king. If Morgan wins, then Morgan becomes the king, and Billy has to stay out of it because he can no longer fight. And so that's what they decide to do, and it's kind of like a. And he said, and one of the rules basically being since neither one of you are going to submit to each other, we have to have something that will basically take you out of the game. And the stipulation ends up being if you are separated from your bike, you're completely terminated from the game, or like you no longer in the game. And Billy is just glad that they came back and they understand. It's for the first time he feels good that they understand what he was trying to, the knowledge and the emotions and everything that he was been trying to impart on them, and why he's been living the lifestyle he's been living, and why he does what he does. He thinks they get it now, and so he's okay with relinquishing being the king because he thinks they understand now. And so the whole thing goes off without a hitch. And of course, things don't go the way they want to. You get the bad guys in the black, obviously, and then all the good guys are in the brown, like they normally are. Some pretty cool stunt coordination in this thing. I mean, all these motorcycle tricks and all these falls off their motorcycle. Those are hard stunts to pull off without getting severely injured. Like this whole thing right here, this dude's back would be scraped up and scratched up beyond belief. And how this is Morgan that's on the one with the stand on, and he's like being dragged by it, and somehow he's able to pull himself back up. But in the end, Alan does end up losing, and Morgan becomes the king. And Morgan, he can decide to keep going with the talent agent or not. And once he becomes king, he has control over this whole troop. He is the king. He can do what they can either leave and let him do what he wants, or the troop can stay with him and continue down the path that he wants to take them down. And Billy is more than happy with this whole thing because he sees in Morgan's eyes that this guy really does get it. Right? A lot of things have changed with Morgan from the beginning to the end because Morgan, towards the beginning, was all about the money, the fame, and the girls and everything else. And then you see that transition with Morgan towards the end, where he's more or less he becomes about the lifestyle, and because he had to go out on his own and see the fame and fortune for himself to realize that ain't really what he wanted. And so he comes back and he wins the crown from Billy. And Billy is all smiles when he gives him the damn thing because he understands. Morgan understands now. And of course, Lynette gives her crown to Angie, and which is the mechanic, because that's what you're supposed to do. So about this time, and this is the weird part of the movie, is like Billy is so committed to the whole thing. Like I said, he's got this cult mindset, and I don't know if this is taking it a little bit too far for this movie or if it's not. But after he loses the crown, he decides to basically go on I guess, a soul searching type trip. But he wants to take care of a couple things before he does. And there's a couple things still hanging in the back of his mind that he thinks he needs to take care of before he does the soul searching or whatever. But he goes on this thing, and of course, Indian is following. Like Indian's been following this whole time ever since they fought. Uh, so he ends up at this fast food joint, and at the fast food joint, he finds the deputy sheriff and beats the shit out of him for beating the shit out of his friend. Grabs his gun and throws it in the fry fryer. And by the time he, beats the shit out of him and leaves him basically, licking his wounds, everybody in the restaurant is clapping and everything after he beats the shit out of the deputy sheriff that abused the hell out of his friend. And after he does that, everybody's clapping. It's almost like the deputy sheriff in that area is an asshole to everybody, not just him and the medieval troop and his friend that he beat the shit out of. So it's almost like that deputy sheriff had a reputation for being an ass, and everybody in that restaurant was glad to see get his ass handed to him. So after he does that he basically gets his revenge on his friend getting beat up. He goes to the kid that he refused to sign the autograph for. Goes to his school, which would never happen these days if you get my drift. Goes to his school with a freaking sword and belt. He realizes he might have, messed up. When a kid meets a hero of theirs that they've seen in a magazine and they don't sign their autograph or something like that, it probably made him feel bad. And it's like, hey, I kind of look up to you, whatever. So he finds the kid in school, gives him the sword and the belt. So and tells him it's yours, and then leaves him. It's kind of a cool thing, to be honest with you. And the kid's just like flabbergasted by the whole thing. But then as he's riding along towards the end here, you can see his left arm, his left sleeve is soaked with blood. He's still bleeding out from that wound on his shoulder that he never let healed. Especially if you're going to be on a motorcycle, you can't really be on a motorcycle with a wound and a gash in your shoulders because you're having to move that with the throttle and everything else. And of course, he's lost so much blood now, it's dripping down to his handlebars and everything else, and he's starting to become delusional as well. And it's probably the first time in this movie you see an actual horse. And so, yeah, he ends up getting mowed down by a damn 18 wheeler. It's the weirdest way to go, I guess. You don't see his body or anything like that. I'm surprised they didn't use Savini's talents to let you see some chunks fly, but they probably did that on purpose. They want to give him a correct send off without showing all the blood and guts. If you get my drift, as if he just disappeared, went on to be one with the next world. And of course, without Indian following him and knowing what happened to him, if Indian wasn't there, he wouldn't have been able to report back what happened to Billy to the other guys. So it's almost as if Indian was supposed to be there to witness all this. And then, of course, everybody is gathered for his funeral. Tuck, Pip. I think that's yeah. Pip is the commentator, the guy that's doing all the talking, and then of course Alan and Lynette, and I think Alan and Lynette end up together after the fact because Alan realizes that Julie's way too young and too immature, and of course, sent her back home. And I think he knew Lynette had a thing for him, but didn't never act on it because she was with Billy. But at this point, Billy had gone too far with his beliefs and all the way to the end to death. And of course, they're just, not, they didn't want him to leave like that. If you look close, it's like the one that affects the most, I think, is Morgan. Because Morgan really didn't want him. Morgan wanted him to stick around and to keep doing these games and all this kind of stuff. Because Morgan loves the games, but you don't realize how much Morgan loved the actual games and doing this type of thing until they get to where the ends here, and you see his evolve. You see him evolve from being the playboy all the way to the guy that cares about everybody and doesn't want anybody to leave. So it's kind of a cool transition that you see Morgan go throughout the whole movie. You think he's an asshole and everything at first, when realizing he was just telling the truth and being blunt the whole time, really. But then he ends up being the leader in the end, and the one that Billy's death ends up affecting the most. And basically, towards the end, it just shows them all with Morgan with the crown and everything, and heading on to their next gig. Now, I mean, I like seeing the characters or the actors from other Romero movies being in this movie. This wasn't, this was a pretty damn good movie for what it is. I like the concept. I'll be honest with you, if there was a Ren Fair that had dudes with motorcycles and knight armor on doing jousting and shit, I would watch the hell out of that. And then, so in my opinion, I'll have to give this. I have to give this movie 3.5 stars or 69% on Criticalist, which puts it in the, I guess you could say, rad category. It's a fun movie. It is a little bit long. There's parts that maybe could have been left out, but you know, it's very detailed for what it is, and that's probably why it doesn't get a lot of showing. In But like I said, I liked it. I like the transition in the characters that you see, and what they have to go through to finally see Billy's vision in the end. But Billy still kind of went over the edge with it to the point of getting himself killed. So it's kind of like, yeah, take it seriously, but don't take it as seriously as me. Don't follow my path, but do follow my path in a certain way. I don't know how you go about saying that or whatever, but that's my opinion. 3.5 stars, 69% on Criticalist, and that is my review. And that is me, Deafrowe, out.